All right, got that going. So the first thing that we're going to do here is we are going to take our art and we're going to load it into Chroma Inspire. And I'll give you guys kind of a heads up on how I prepared this art for this live stream. So what I did is I hand scribbled that, and then I gave it an oval border. My oval border is 4 millimeters wide. And then I copied that and did I want to say it's a 2.5 millimeter wide, which is going to be the red right here. And then I ran a yellow on the center line and a light, well, it's a dark blue, it almost looks black, around the outside edge. And I'll go over why I did all of that when we bring it into Chroma. So we'll go ahead and open up Chroma here. I have a new design selected already because it won't let me open it without doing that. And we're going to import bitmap because that's what I uploaded into the group. If you guys do have questions, go ahead and ask them as we go. I believe I can see your comments. At least I hope I can see your comments. If I'm not responding, tag me and we'll go from there. So let's go ahead, and I got my folders here. And there is our art. I saved it as a JPEG. We'll go ahead and bring it in. And now we have the art. It's centered in the window. I'm going to open up one more thing here that I should have had open when I started, but that seems to be the number one thing I forget to open. So let's go ahead and we'll look at our size that we have here. Now I have it as 104.3 millimeters. And 104.3 millimeters, let's do a conversion here. 3 millimeters, 2 inches, is 4 inches wide. So that's actually the size that I want it. If you guys want to make it a little bit narrower, you're more than welcome to, and you can do that by resizing it here. Under the transform tab in the object. I'm going to call this the object properties window. I don't know what it's really called, but that's what I'm going to call it. So we have that open. I have my artwork in the background. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to the sequence window. And because I have it the right size that I want, I'm going to lock it. And so we're going to click on the lock right there. And what that's going to do is it's going to keep me from moving my art or being able to select it and move it around on the screen, which is going to be helpful when we're trying to click on objects on top. So a lot of times when I do this, it depends on how I'm planning on how I'm planning on sewing it out when I tackle a project like this. So the way that I set up this border right here is actually how I would set it up to do applique. And if I was going to do applique, I would do the border first and then I do the words. If I'm just going to sew a straight border and hot cut it, I'm going to do the center first and then I'm going to do the edge. So kind of the order is different on how I would handle that going into actual digitizing. But let's say that we're just going to applique it on. So we're going to start and we're going to do the border. And then we'll do the text on the inside. So the first part that we need to do when we do an applique is we need to do our placement stitch. So if you select your run tool, which is right here, and this will give us a running stitch, and we come to the center, and we're going to do bottom. And I'm going to zoom in. Right now I'm at 200%. I'm going to hold down the control key on my keyboard, and that's going to zoom towards my mouse. And I'm going to go to about 300% because I can see the line nice right there. So I'm going to click on it. And now I'm going to hold down the control key. And every time I hold down when I hold down the control key and I click, it's going to put in a curve node. Now, right now you see a straight line, and that's because we don't have a third point for it to reference and follow that around with. So we'll go ahead and do another curve and another curve. Now you can see that it didn't follow it as closely as I would like it to. So I'm going to hit the backspace key, and that's going to take back the last point that I did. And I'm going to come back, and we're going to do right clicks going around the border to set up a placement stitch. Now I've come to the top. I can't go up anymore, so I'm going to hit the space bar, and it's going to turn my mouse into a little hand. And now I can drag the screen up. When I let go of the space bar, it releases the hand. So now I'm back to my mouse. I'm going to hold down the control key and I'm going to follow the line going around. We'll go one there, and I'm going to come right back to my stop point, or my start point, and I'll hit enter. Now it's going to ask me after I hit enter where I want it to start, which I want it to start right there. I'm going to hit enter again. It's going to end at the end of the run stitch that we just did. And I'm going to hit enter a third time, and that's actually going to place the stitch. Now you can't really see the stitch very well right now. If we turn on our true view, you can see it a little bit better. And if we hide our art, then you can really see it. So we'll bring the art back. Now I'm going to turn that. I'm going to make sure that I have it selected. And I'm going to turn it yellow. I'm just going to keep it with the same color scheme that I've got going on around here. So that would be our placement stitch. We would sew that out, and then we would hit the frame out on the machine, and the hoop would come out. We'd set our fabric down, and now we need to tack the fabric down with a cut line. So we can go ahead and select our run tool again, and we're going to follow the blue line this time. And we will, I start with a left click, and then I hold down my control key, and I move around. And when I get to the edge, I hit spacebar. So you guys may have seen me do patch borders this way. Whenever I make patches personally, I do it applique method a lot. And one of the reasons that I do is because I have a laser that I can pre-cut my applique shapes. Before I did that, I had a circuit, and I could cut my applique shapes on that. And so I could get a nice uniform border going all the way around. But before I had those tools, I would hot cut them. So I would get a soldering iron or a wood burning tool, and I would go through and I would cut them out right around the border. So I'm back to the start. I'm going to end our stitch. Enter. It's going to ask me for the stop point. Enter again is for the stop point. Enter a third time, and now it's put our stitch right there. So now we've put our stabilizer in. We've hit the start button. It did a placement stitch. The machine framed out. We put our fabric down. We hit the start button again. It came in and it did our cut line. And so now we would hit spacebar, or not spacebar. Now we would hit frame out again. The machine would frame out, and we would cut around the blue line with our applique scissors, or I just use regular scissors. But there are special scissors just for that. So finally, after it does that, now we're going to do our tack down stitch. And our tack down stitch is going to be our red line that we've done here. Now again, if you're wondering how I set this up, I made my border and I made it 4 millimeters wide. Then I copied that line and I made the red line, and I made it 3.5 millimeters wide, or 2.5, I can't remember. One of those two. And then I copied it and I made it just into like a 1 millimeter wide line or 0.5 millimeter wide line. And then I copied that and I pasted it again, and I moved it out just a little bit for the cut line. And I changed colors each time I did that so that we would have this nice graphical representation to go off of. So typically our tack down stitches are zigzag stitches. A lot of times you'll see a zigzag going around. Now in Inspire, we do not have zigzag. A zigzag is basically a really open satin. So we're going to take our satin blocks tool, and we're going to come right back to our center, and I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more. And I'm going to start on the top of the red line, and I'm going to place a point. And now it wants to know where is the other side. Because we're going to have this be one side, it wants to know now where is our other side. So I'm going to select the bottom side. And so what that did is I told it this is going to be the inside and that's going to be the outside. And this line in between them is going to be the stitch direction. And now it wants me to do the same thing again. It wants me to place another couple of points. So I'm going to hold down the control key and I'm going to click and I'm going to come down and I'm going to click again. And so now I did that again. Now I've got I told it this is going to be the inside, this is going to be the outside, and that's going to be my stitch direction. And I'll come around and do it again. And again. I'm going to hold down the space bar. And I'm going to do it again. Now this comes into practice when you're using your tools. When I actually digitize, I can go a lot faster than this, but I'm slowing down in case if you guys have any questions. I haven't seen any comments come through, so I'm wondering if I'm not picking up comments here. But we'll go ahead, and something went wrong, so I'm going to back out, and I'm just going to start again because it went all the way out. But if you're following along, you go ahead and keep moving around on the circle and I'll catch up. Oh, I see what happened. It changed from my satin tool to my run tool, and now I've changed it back, and for some strange reason it's still in the satin, so something weird happened today. We'll just roll with it and I'll continue going around my circle. Hold down the space bar so I can move up, inside, outside. And it's kind of like, some people call it like a ladder. But that's pretty much what we're doing, is we're just going to end up going around. Now, if you have, I want to say Lux, and Plus, I believe you can just right click on the first one, and the first line that you do, you can copy it and paste it, and right click on it and tell it you want to convert it to a zigzag. I believe you also have the ability to convert it to a steel stitch, which in this software, when it comes to borders, I believe a steel stitch is actually a satin stitch, the way that this software handles it. But we'll keep going around here and get closer to the bottom, back where I started at least. So one of the nice parts about doing borders like this is I'm spending a little bit more time on the border, but you guys can save this border and just the border by itself. And then if you ever want to do another patch in this shape, you already have the border digitized. You can open that, or you can merge that design in, and you'll be able to utilize the exact same border that we just made. Now I am overlapping right here on my start and stop point. I'm overlapping by, that'll be just a few stitches. So we've went around. We'll go ahead and hit enter. Now it's going to ask me, do I want my start point right there? And I do. I always want my start points on the inside of these types of stitches. And the same with my stop point. So right now it wants to put the stop point right there. I'm going to move it over here. And I do that just by clicking up there. And the reason is if you guys do actually hot cut this border out, having your knots on the outside will make those few threads fray right there. And you'll have to trim those off, and sometimes you get a little less coverage. So let's go ahead and look at our patch. Now, right now this is a straight satin stitch, so we're going to change that. I've went to my select tool and I have it selected. Sorry, I wiggle my mouse a lot. But I do have it selected. Now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to open up my density by quite a bit. I'm going to go to like 3 millimeters. Not 0.3, I'm going to go to 3. And that really opens it up. And now I'm going to come to my underlay right here, and I'm going to take all the underlay out and hit apply. And you can see that now we are left with just a zigzag. And so that's going to be our tack down stitch. Let me pull something up really quick here on my other screen. And so just bear with me for a second. And there we go. So I'm just pulling up my live, and yep, I can see that I do have 5 comments. Sorry I didn't address them sooner, but I can now see them, and so I should be able to see them as we progress. So now that we've opened up that zigzag, now we're going to do our outside, our final satin stitch. So let's go ahead. We're going to start at the bottom. We're just going to do it exactly like we did before. I cannot physically tell it what width I want this to be, and so we're going to have to digitize each one of these, but if we do it, we can always go back to it and reuse our border. So let's go ahead in just a little bit more, and I'm going to start right here on the top and go to the outside, and we'll make our way around using control click as we go around. Sometimes people set it, you can go into your settings and you can change it from a control click to a right click, which is something that I do because I don't just digitize in Chroma software, and a lot of the other softwares, the right click is how you place a So I put a point way out there, I hit backspace, and now you can see this line is a little funky, but as we come up and around, when I put in my next point, it's going to fix it. And we'll come up and around some more. Make sure I'm going on the outside of the black line, because if I don't, it'll be a little wonky. And you can see I'm trying to keep my stitch directions 90 degrees to the outside width, and the reason I do that is so that I get a nice smooth looking border and it'll be uniform going around. Sometimes when we get into lettering, you'll change that, but we are just going to go and keep it 90 degrees right now for the outside border. So you can probably hear that clicking. That's my spacebar key going down and up so that I can move the screen around. Now we'll come around a little more, and we'll place a couple more nodes. And that looks like I put those a little too far out, so I'm going to hit the backspace key. I'm going to do some just a little closer. There. There. And I'm going to make sure I bring my last points in a little bit further. I'm going to hit enter. It wants my start point. I'm going to make it up here. My stop point, I'm going to make sure that that's on the inside. And there we go again. We've got that. Pause. And there. Okay. I think I've got it now. I can see comments. Okay. So I'm going to zoom out here so that we can take a look at our border. And you can see that it goes nice and around. You can see I've got a little bit of a problem right over here. Now we can always edit our points afterwards. We can select our stitch like we've done here, and we can go to the node edit, and we can look at our nodes right here and kind of see what's going on. So it looks like I needed to add a node there and add a node there, and I need to move it in just a little bit and out just a little bit. Now you can see that it didn't move anything in real time, so when I hit the select button, it'll regenerate that and move it there. So let's go and we'll move on to the text. So one of the things about text, let me get my hand tool out here so we can move. One of the things about text is you digitize text very similar to how you write text. So I'm not going to come over here and do it backwards. I'm going to start right here, and I'm going to move along and kind of flow to the right as you would if you were actually writing the letters. Sometimes you do want to make it look like you have, like this tail of the N, I might want to make it look like I have it tucked under right there, and I'll show you guys how to do that. So let's come over here and we're going to zoom in a little bit. And I'm using my zoom tool. I'm holding down control and I'm coming in. I don't like to go in much more than 600%. I'll go a little more, but I'm not going to come in here like this and try and place points because the difference between here and here is minimal when you get out to 1-to-1. So I come in about 6% or 600%, and we'll go ahead and we'll use our digitized satin here. Let me go over real quick the border, one more thing on the border. Now I have a parallel underlay, which is going like that. I want to add a contour underlay underneath, and that's going to put 2 rails on the outside. Could just be buffering. Let me look over here and make sure that it's, yeah. Hopefully you guys can see. If you can't, let me know. I want to make sure that we're doing okay and that we're not having problems. So if we are having problems, let me know. I am recording it and I will upload it just in case if you guys can't watch. It should be available shortly after this. So let's go ahead and grab our satin tool, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do inside, outside. So I'm going to start with a point right there, and I'm going to do a point next to it. Now I don't want to put my 2 points right on top of each other. It'll come to a really hard point, and it'll end up kind of cutting out the fabric. So we always want to kind of chisel off our points because they'll pull in when it's being sewn out. So I'm going to do a couple of control clicks. I'm going to do a left click right there to come around the corner. And I'm going to do a control click and a control click and another. I'm going to do a control click, and here I'm going to do a left click. And now I'm going to do control click, inside, outside. And I'm going to start angling my stitch angle a little bit as we come up to the top here. Because remember, this line going this way between our inside and outside points are our stitch angle. And we're going to move around. And I don't need to follow the art exactly. We're going to come down. And we'll get to right here. And then I'm going to stop. I'm going to hit enter. I'm fine with my start point being right there. I'm going to make my stop point being, my end point be right there. So the reason why I brought this point down to right here is I actually want to make it look like the N is tucked under right here. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to actually put in something I like to call a bridge. And that is where I'm going to put a point here. I'm actually going to make another satin, and I'm going to have it come across just a little bit outside of that satin where the N is. So now I have that little bridge. I'm going to come over and overlap my satin. You always want to overlap just in case if it pushes apart a little, you're still going to get coverage. I'm going to come over and down, and I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to make my start point actually be right over here because this is where this one finishes. And so I want my start and stop points to all line up. I'm actually going to put my stop point right back on top, and we're going to dim our artwork for a second. So I'm going to click right there, and we're going to look And we're going to take it out of 3D view, and we're going to look here and see if we can see the jumps and trims. So right here you can see that it didn't trim, it's just moving along. So we'll go ahead and turn back on the art again, and I'm going to digitize with the true view because it's a little bit easier for you guys to watch. I'm going to select my satin tool, and these little 4 arrows are denoting where the last needle point is. So my last needle point is right there. I'm going to overlap over this satin that I created here. And we're going to come up, and I'm going to come to about right there. And I'm going to come in just a little bit. I'm going to put my start point right there, and my stop point is going to be right there. And now we've come this way. So I'm going to do the same type of trick here on getting my bridge. And now I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to come down the end. And I want to go back 1 point, and I want to come here because I'm going to make it just a little bit. I'm going to start tilting my stitches right here, so when I get to the bottom, I can just end it off. We're going to put our start point right there and our stop point right there. And now you can see how it looks like it's tucked over the top of that, and it's tucked over the top of that. And now we're going to come down this side. So sometimes when I get into this, it does put your stitch points out a little bit further. So it's easier for me to restart and make sure everything's lined up if I go out of true view there for a second so that we can come around. And here I'm really going to start angling my stitches as I come into this corner here. And I did a left click right there, and now I'm going to do a right click, or not a right click, a control click, and there, control click, and there, and now we're going to come up just a little bit. I'm going to come right up to the top. I'm actually going to take that point back. I'm going to start angling my stitches coming in here a little bit sooner. I'm going to do a right click and a right click right there, a right click and a right click right, not right click, sorry, control click. I do digitize in Wilcom software quite a bit, and it is different. So I've come around the corner, and I'm going to stop right there. Let's go ahead and turn on true view so you can see how we kind of turned the corner right there. So now I'm going to come right here, and I'm going to start working the way into the P. So I'm going to turn off the true view there for a second again. I'm going to select my satin tool, and I'm going to place my first 2 points and my second 2 points. Now I don't need to follow the artwork exactly. Let's turn back on the true view so you guys can see. Because, to be honest, I hand drew this, and we don't need it to be exactly true to the art. You can make your own kind of variations as we go through. So now I've done the S, and I'm going to come over here and we're going to do the P. And I don't see any new comments, so hopefully we're still going live. And it's just my internet being wonky. But I will upload this to YouTube. Again, I'll say that. So now, generally when I write P's, I go down and then come back up and around. So I'm going to start just right down here at the bottom. And I'm going to come up. And I'm going to go to the right. And I'm going to start it over here. And I'm going to tell it to stop right there. And now I'm going to come in here, and we're going to go around the inside of the P. And I'm going to come right there, and I'm going to stop it right there. I'm going to do my start point and my stop point. I'm going to go ahead and do right there. And now I'm going to come over to the inside. Because I want it to kind of have a scripty look, we're going to come up. And we're going to merge right into the eye. And I'm going to backspace a little. We'll come right there. And I'm going to tell it I want it to start there and I want it to stop there. Now the eye I'm going to do a little bit different because I have it placed so close together. I'm actually going to start here at the top. I'm going to again chisel off the point. I'm going to hold down Control and click. And so for those that are watching, you can see these square nodes, these square points, and you can see the circles. The circles stand for curved nodes and the squares stand for corner nodes. So every time you see a square, it's going to be like a hard straight corner. Everywhere you see a circle, it's going to be a nice arc. So I'm going to come down. And this is something that's done similar to A's in text when you come up to the 2 points coming close together. A lot of times it's called capping. So I've come down, and now I'm going to start into my next leg. And we'll go ahead and hold down Control and click. Control and click. And come around here. We're going to come up, and you can see I come up kind of into the middle of the R here, the top of the R, and that's okay. I do always want to overlap everything that I do when I want them to meet, and that's so when the push and pull happens, they'll still actually touch. So I do see a comment here that I didn't see before, and it's by Jana. So the question is, how do you change from inches to millimeters? So you would go into Tools, and you would go into General Options, and as it comes up, the first unit right here is metric, or you can change that to inches. So if I wanted to bounce back and forth between metric and inches, that's where I would do it. You don't really need to know a lot because I sized everything before we came in, so you don't need to check your physical dimensions. But that is how you would actually change it. Sometimes when I bring in art, I'll go in here, I'll change it to inches. I'll scale the art to where I want it, and then I'll come back in here and I'll scale it back to metric, or change it back to metric, so that I know my art, you know, let's say this is 4 inches wide, I know that it's 4 inches wide, and then when I actually digitize, I digitize using millimeters, which is very, very common. You might also notice while we're in here, we've got the default style. So the default style is the fabric settings that it's going to apply to your document. So I have this set on cap, but you can change it like a towel or a vinyl. And what that does is it changes your properties over here. It'll change your density mostly. And sometimes your underlay a little bit. So if you know what fabric you're going to be sewing on when you start, go in here and change it to whatever fabric type that is before you start digitizing, and that'll kind of help you with some of your settings. So we'll go ahead and move out of there, and now I'm going to come back here, and we're just going to keep on going around. I do like that little chisel-y point that I've got right there, so I'm going to make sure that I capture it, and we'll hold down Control, and we'll go around. Now I have a very, very pronounced point right here. So I've started curving it, and I'm going to do a left click right there to put in a corner note because that's a hard edge. And then I'm going to come right over here, and this is another kind of hard edge. And I'm going to click, and I'm going to come down just a little bit and click again. And I'm going to start back in my curve nodes here. And I made a mistake somewhere, so I'm just going to hit backspace and come across. We'll keep going. So when you get to ease in text, there's a couple different ways. I'm going to show you this way. I could just digitize straight through, but I find that when I do that, it causes, I get a little extra, density right there. And right now my enter key's not working, so I'm going to go ahead and change tools and go back to the SAT, and I'm going to redigitize this. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to jump across the space of that, where that overlap would be. Let me catch up to you guys here. There. And start back down. Angling my stitches until I get here. Coming up. And I'm going to go in just a little bit, and now I can set my start point and I can set my stop point, and I'll set it right there. So to close this distance without digitizing straight through, we would come to our run tool, and we'll start a stitch right where our needle is, and we'll come over to where I'm planning on starting my next satin, and we'll just put down one stitch, and then we'll go back to our satin tool and start right there. You can see I kind of start a little bit on the inside, and I'm doing my curved stitches, and another curved stitch, and another curved stitch, node I should say, and I'll catch up here. And I'm going to actually keep them curved just a little bit. It's kind of hard to see the lines that I've placed on top of the black text, but that's okay. We'll come around. I'll just jump right over the gap. And we'll come around here to right there. And we'll come in just a little bit. And you can see it defaults our start point to right there. And we'll just tell it that we want to end right there. Hit enter. And now we've generated those stitches. So the reason why I stopped right there is when I write my D's in a script, I come this way, and I come up, and then I come around. So I'm going to go ahead and drop in a little bit right here, and I'm going to come up. Okay, if you wanted to put a border around my text, what would I do? That's a great question, Krista, and I will show you right after we're done with this D. So we're going to come around, and I actually want to bring that right over to there so that my stitches line up, and I'm going to come way down here and cover it. And we're going to come in just a little bit right there, and I'm going to tell it I want my start point to be right over here because that's where we left off. And I do want it to end right there. So now we have that curve coming around on the D. And we can go ahead and come up to the top. Okay. So the digitized blocks tool that we're using, I think that's what it calls. They call it the satin tool. That's pretty much what we do. We can make open zigzags, and we can do satin stitches with that tool. We have our run tool, which we can use for lines coming across, and I do have something wonky going on right there that I'm going to take a look at. And then we have our complex fill tool, which is good for larger areas. So I got down here, I hit enter to tell it I was done putting in points. It's asking me where it wants my start point. I'm going to put it right there. And my end point, I'm actually going to end it right in the same spot. And so now we have that. Now I want to look at my shapes right here. I'm guessing that I made a mistake when I was putting in my points with that object right there. So we'll go ahead and we'll look at the node edit, and we'll take a look here, and you can see that I put my start point right there, and my start point actually needs to be right there, and my end point up there. So let's go ahead and go back to our select tool, and you can see that it removed that really kind of wonky stitch. Now let's look at our underlay, actually our density. So our density is at 0.4, which is considered a standard density. Zoomed in like this, I can see all these gaps and spaces, but if I come way out to 100%, which my screen needs to be calibrated, but if I come way out, you can see that it all looks like really tight stitching. And one of the more common problems that I see that people have is they'll digitize something and they'll be in here like this, and they'll say, oh no, I can see between my stitches, and they'll bump the density up. And if you go up too much, you're going to end up causing yourself a lot of problems like needle breaks, and I mean, it just becomes a really big problem. There are a few exceptions to that. With digitizing, really your only limitations are the limitations by your physical machine. But there are some good guidelines to go by. Right here, the majority of our satin stitches are over, let's go to our measure tool, which is the little ruler right here, and we'll measure them. I'm going to hold down the control key and zoom in, and we're going to measure from point to point. So I have to click and I have to drag, and I'm about 2.8 millimeters right there. So for 2.8 millimeters, that would definitely be a center line underlay that I want. So I'm going to select all of my satins here in the text, because there is no point in editing our text. Let's drop that one. There's no point in editing all these different satin stitches all by themselves. We can grab them by a group, and we can say, hey, I want it to have a center line, and I want it to have a parallel underlay. And we can hit apply, and we've just changed that with all of them. So let me explain the underlays that I used and why I used them. So our stitches are fairly close together. They're about 2 millimeters. So if I put in an edge run underlay, which is technically what I prefer and use on larger satin stitches, if I put in that edge run underlay, then there's a good chance that it's going to poke out the sides. So that's why we use a centerline underlay, because that's going to help kind of lift it up and keep it from sinking into the fabric. The parallel underlay, which is, to me, it's like a zigzag, but it's a one-pass zigzag. The reason why I'm using that is that's going to help give it some loft. It's going to help lift it up a little bit, and it's also going to fill in the density. It's going to make it look more dense than it actually is, and that is why I'm using those underlays. For our border, our outside satin border, I am using a contour, which is like an edge run underlay to kind of set up a little wall right here that the stitches can fall against, and then I'm using a parallel, which is a single zigzag, to go around to give it a little bit more loft and fill it in. So the last couple of things I'm going to do here is I'm going to push a key on my keyboard and hope something good happens. Nope. All right. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down spacebar a little bit, and I'm going to come in and we're going to look at everything. I do want to go from satin number 6 down to the bottom, and I want to change it to black because I want my text to be black, and my border color I'm going to have be red. So that would be my inspired patch. I could go ahead and send this to the machine using the send to machine button, which is right here, and we could sew it out. I will show you that if you click on the print button, we get this nice little screen here, and it shows us our color changes. So we've got yellow, blue, then the satin, and then finally our text in the middle. So we'll go ahead and close that, and I want to say, yep, I did my run and my zigzag in two different or the same color, I should say, and I want that actually to be a different color so that we stop at it. It can be the same color as my satin stitch, but I'm not going to put it. Your Chroma zooms in and out all the time. So for zooming on Chroma, it is like with the mouse button. So if you're using a touchpad, sometimes when you move your fingers, it'll activate the scroll, and that's going to be what's going to cause it to zoom in and out a lot. A lot of times when I digitize, I do it at my desktop computer, so I have a traditional mouse with the scroll wheel, and that's what I'm using. Alright, so we did have a couple of questions I'm going to go through. If you wanted to put a border around your text, what would you do? So And then I also have another, when do you adjust the density? Which are both really good questions. So let's go ahead and I'm going to put up some text right here, and I'm just going to put hello. And I'm going to hit apply. So when I want to put a border around my text, I'm going to do it in a graphical user interface. So by that I mean, like, I'm going to do it in Corel, where I can physically scale and outline things before I bring it into my software. But if you wanted to outline a piece of text, I'd bring it in. I'm going to turn it to like a, I don't want to do a brick pattern. Let's look around here and do it more like a corn pattern probably. So I get my text in here, and generally when I outline text, it's going to be a complex fill text. So it's going to be flat. This is kind of like satin that is just splitting. So to outline the text, what I would do is I would use my I'd use my satin blocks, and I'd physically go around the corner. When I'm doing lots of straights, I hold down the shift key, and that locks it straight. It locks it to whatever axis I'm moving along. So I would come here, and this is why I would outline it in like Corel first, so that I could actually control the widths of those very well. Right now I can see when I put that left click and I start to move, it kind of tells me a little bit what my width is down on the bottom right, but as I move, it disappears. Which is another reason. I know in the higher versions of Chroma, you can physically just tell it to outline your text, and it'll do it automatically. How do you install a new font without letter by letter? So the fonts that you're talking about are generally considered embroidery fonts or DST fonts. Really, when you buy a DST font, you're going to have to bring it in letter by letter. There is a trick that I like to do that makes it easier to bring it in letter by letter. But I'm going to answer one more question. That's going to be about density. So the question was, when do you adjust the density? You can do it at 2 points. You can do it before you digitize it, or you can do it after you digitize it. So if I'm going to set the density of my satin fill here, I can select my satin fill, and I can come over here and I can tell it I want it at a 0.35 density, which is a little bit denser. And then any object I digitize after that is going to have a 0.35 density. If I want to open it back up to a 0.4, I can do that, and now that one's going to be at a 0.4. So you can do that before you put down your points, or you can do it after you put down your points. A lot of times I'll forget to do it before, so I'll do it afterwards. But afterwards, you just select the object and you can change it to a 0.3 density, and it'll make it more dense. So the best way to keep equal widths on the text is to look when you're digitizing a satin column. If you look down at the bottom, when I move it, it kind of gives me a little blip. I'm pointing at it with my finger, which I realize you can't see. Right above my little search window right here, you can see that it is listing a width. So if I come in here, I can see like 2-3 millimeters right there. And now if I'm going to go in a straight line, I'm going to hold down the shift, and it's going to lock it to an axis and lock it to an axis. And so now I have that equal width. As I go down, can you lock your scroll? I do not know on the Apple version of the software, because I do not use this on a Mac. I only use this on a PC, so that would be an excellent question to ask Chroma. And we'll move down here. I've got one. How do you install a new font without letter by letter? So if you have a DST font or a machine font that you get, you're going to have to basically, you go to File and you merge and you bring them all in one at a time, and it's very, very tedious. The workaround that I have found for that is I'm going to go ahead and open up a new File Explorer, and we're going to see what I've got over here for a second. And okay, bring it back. So we go to our C drive, and we go to Designs, and we go to Chroma. Okay, so this is how I set it up, and it makes things a little bit easier. And you're going to see different categories here. I've got birds, butterflies, flowers, and fonts. So I added that font folder. It was not there, and I'm going to open it up. And I've got 2 fonts listed. I've got my font because I actually digitized a font in a different software and exported it as a DST so I could try this. So we'll go in there and you can see all the different letters that I have. Okay. So after you make these changes, you'll need to restart Chroma. But if you put your fonts in a fonts folder in this location on your computer, when you come over here, you can go to your Designs tab. Okay, so the Designs tab, we have our Sequence tab. The Design tab is right next to it. And you can see now over here we have the different folders. And the folder that I put in there that was fonts is now right here. It says fonts. I can click on the little open thing. And now I have my 2 choices for fonts. So I can select my font. And you can see now it's going to list all of my letters right here in this nice, easy, convenient area. So if I want to spell my name, I'm just going to click on the file and I'm going to bring it in, and it just merged it. And just like that, you can bring them in and you can align them based off of the centers. And that is how I set up DST fonts to bring them in right here. I think that it's just a lot easier. It takes away a lot of the frustration of having to go to File and merge and bring in every letter by itself. This, you can just kind of scroll through and grab them. It's not a perfect solution, but it's a lot easier than the other solutions that are out there at the moment. The other way that you can bring in new fonts is you can go out to the internet and you can look for TrueType fonts. Chroma Inspire in all the versions of Chroma, when we come over here to our text tool, and I'm going to go back to Sequence, and I'm going to go ahead and put down a letter. So we have the ability to auto-digitize TrueType fonts, and a lot of times it does a really good job. Sometimes you'll get a really wonky letter, and you'll have to go in and kind of fix it. And sometimes when I get a wonky letter, I just redigitize the letter to start with. But you can see here, we're using our Arial font. I'm going to select my objects here with my select tool, and then I'm going to click on this little TT box, and that's going to open up my ability to use any of my TrueType fonts that I have on my system. So I'm going to pick this one. I'm going to hit OK, and you can see how this is an example right here on this E that it didn't do a very good job. But on all the other letters, it did a decent job. So we can go in and we can look for a different font. Let's go with Adler, because I think that one's going to come out pretty well. And that was actually a really bad choice of a font because it's distressed. Let's try this one and see what it does. So that one too, again, right there on the E, just a little bit. It's a little wonky. But we can select it and we can break it apart into individual letters. And we can select the E here and go into the node edit, and we can look at some of the, we can look at the nodes. We can add, I believe, we can add an angle line and go right there and change that angle and go and hit select, and that kind of fixed the E for us right there. So you can utilize TrueType fonts. You might have to go in and add different stitch angles to make them look a little better. Sometimes you have to carve them. And sometimes you just have to redigitize the letter. A lot of times when I redigitize a letter, I'll just go to my graphics program, I'll type a J in the font, and I'll use my little snipping tool, Microsoft snipping tool, to snip a little image of it, save it, and bring that in, and then manually digitize the letter there. But it can save you a lot of time using TrueType fonts if you know, you can utilize this and you can throw it on something and it'll go down and it'll look okay. So we'll go ahead and delete that. Let me go down the questions I have again. I'm going to let you guys know that when you guys write a comment, it takes a little bit before I see the comment. So I'm just going to kind of readjust myself here and sit up a little taller. I'm going to look and ask if you guys have any more questions. And I'll draw a line on the screen because I'm watching it on my computer. So I'll draw a line on the screen so that I know that that's when I asked a question. If you guys have any more questions, and when it comes across, I'll give you a minute to ask if you have any more questions. And if you don't have any more questions, then we will go ahead and sign off. I would like to ask that if you guys do sew out this patch, I would love to see your guys' take on it. And see how you guys digitized it, how well it sewed out for you. If you do have problems trying to sew it out and you want to adjust some things, you can feel free to post here in the Chroma Help group. You can post over in the Embroidery Nerd group, which is another group that I run, or you can post in the comments here and I'll circle back and try to catch all the comments as they come through and make sure that I try to answer everybody's questions. So I saw my line come across the screen and I did not see any new comments come up. Let me scroll up and down here on this window. I don't see any more comments that came up. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys enjoy the rest of your night. I would love to see, again, I'd love to see you guys. Could you use the workaround for SVG fonts? Okay, that is a good question. So SVG fonts and BX fonts. BX fonts cannot be used in Chroma. BX fonts are proprietary to Embrilliance. So you have to have Embrilliance software to be able to utilize a BX font. SVG fonts are essentially, it's a scalable vector graphic. So if you want to do an SVG font, which I don't have any, I wish I did so I could show you this right now, but you would just bring in your, because it's SVG, I import it into a graphics program first. But you can also bring them in by going to File and Import Artwork, and then you can import the SVG files because they're vector files. And when you get the SVG files into the software, then you can try utilizing the Auto Digitize button to digitize the SVG fonts. A lot of times with SVG fonts, they are actually just TrueType fonts that somebody has exported and saved as an SVG font. So one of the things I like to do is if I have a customer asking me to digitize something in like a logo or a sign, and they give me an SVG of the graphic and the font, a lot of times I'll ask them, hey, do you know the name of the font that you guys used when you created this? And a lot of times they will, and they'll let you know what font they used, and so you can go look it up and find the actual TrueType font so that you can type it into your software. It's something that I just started asking people because you would spend, if I digitized some wedding napkins and the lady wanted them in some weird font, and it would have taken me hours and hours and hours to manually digitize them. So I asked her, hey, what was the font you used? And she gave it to me, and then I was able to knock them out in a matter of like 30 minutes because I knew what font it was, and I was able to just kick them out. So if somebody does give you an SVG font, ask them if they know the TrueType font that it was based off of, or that it was used to create that. And more than likely, you'll be able to get that font, and you'll be able to utilize that in the software. If not, you're going to have to import each letter using the import artwork, and you'll have to try and auto digitize it or manually digitize it from there. So just depending on how your results will get. After you do digitize your letters, you can save them. What I like to do is I like to save them as in a .rde file, and it's the same thing. I believe these birds right here, these are .rde files, so you can drop them in the Chroma folder. You can drop them in fonts once they are digitized, and then you can drag and drop them in. So if you do end up digitizing your own font, or you create a digitized font, you can go through and utilize that. So it's all about not having to do things again. So like with this border that we just digitized, if you guys want to take this border by itself, and let's go over here, I'm going to select all of the parts of the border. I hold down my shift key and I selected it all, and I missed that one. So I've selected all of the border pieces right here. And I'll just do it again. So I selected all my border pieces, I copy them, and then I'm going to go into a new file and I'm going to paste them right here. And now I have that whole applique border over here all by itself. I'll save this. You can save this as 2.5 by 4 oval patch border, and then the next time you guys need to do a oval patch, you can pull out your border, because you've already digitized it once. There's no sense in digitizing it again. It'll save you time going forward. So the more stuff you digitize and you test so out and you make sure it sews out good, the next time that you need an aspect like that, you can jump back to that old file and reuse parts, and it'll save you time. So I'm going to go ahead and clear out this file because I don't need that one anymore, and I'm going to leave this one up. There's one thing that I forgot to digitize, and we'll do that really quick, is I didn't digitize the top of the eye for Inspired. And the reason why I did not do that is because I kind of wanted you guys to come up with something on your own. So you can do just like a little circle, and that can be your eye for the top of Inspired, or you can do a asterisk. We're going to come this way and back down. I got distracted, I'll be honest with you. But you guys can make whatever you want for the top of this eye. Be creative and do something different. But I'm going to do a simple circle right here really quick. And I will come up with something else when I actually go and get ready to sew it out. So that's my horrible circle. We do have another question that is, can you expand and reduce without causing an issue? So that's going to be a yes and a no answer. We can expand and contract the border all we want. And we'll go ahead and come in here. So we can expand and contract this. The limitation that we're going to run into is if we get too small, that our underlay is going to start poking out. But because this is a native .rde file, we manually digitized all of the aspects of this file. Because it's a .rde file and it's native, it's an object file. Okay? So what happens with an object file is when you expand, you can see the lines expanding with it. It's going to regenerate the stitches that go inside. So if our satin is at a 0.4 density, generally if you resize a machine file and you go down to this big, it's going to compact all those stitch points. And now you've got a problem because all your stitch points are so close that your density is just ridiculously thick, and it's going to make it hard and you're going to get a lot of thread breaks. But because this is a .rde, it's an object file, we can resize it down to this point, and it's going to regenerate the stitch points to keep it at a 0.4 density. So we can shrink this down. Tell our border is about like 2 millimeters, really, maybe 1. I'd keep it at like 2 or 3 because we're doing an applique under there, and you want to have a little bit extra to cover those ends. But we can go from about 2 millimeters in the border to roughly 7 millimeters in the border if you really wanted to go that big. And by talking that border, It's the outside satin, and it's the distance between this stitch point and this stitch point. So right now that's 5.5 millimeters. And if we look at our ratio, that's 127.2 millimeters, which is 2 millimeters to inches, which is 5 inches. We could go up even bigger to, what are we at now? We're at 192. So 192 millimeters to inches that's 7 inches, and it's regenerated all of our stitch points, so we should not have any issue sewing that out at a larger size or so much a smaller size, as long as we're making sure that our satin column is not getting too narrow. So even then, right there, I can still go a little bit further down. And that's really our limiting factor, is the width of our satin column. And that's because of limitations on our physical machine. If our machine could do a 0.5 millimeter wide satin stitch and still cover with the underlay that's set there, then I wouldn't hesitate to shrink it down even further. But I know, based off of experience, that if I drop this down to a 0.5 millimeter, now I'm going to need, or even less than a millimeter, I'm going to need to change my underlay settings in here, because now we've went from utilizing a contour and a parallel underlay. Now we need to change it to a center line and take out the contour, because the width of the stitch, it's going to start, if we have an edge run on the width of the stitch that we're getting into, it's going to start pushing the underlay outside the outside edge. And I might even take out the parallel and just go with a straight center line underlay, and now I can go down a little bit further. But I'm going to make sure I select everything before I go down a little bit further. So that's really what our limiting factor is whether or not we're going to start running into the physical limitations of the machine. So I hope that answers your questions on expand and reduce. Because we're in a native RDE file, we can expand and reduce with minor changing of the underlay, because it's going to regenerate all of our stitch points. Now, if this was a DST file and we did this, it would compact all our stitch points and our density would become too dense and it would cause a problem. And I'm going to change that to black. And I'm going to ask if there are any more questions with that. Hopefully there aren't too many, but if there are, I'm more than happy to answer them. I'm going to turn off my art so that you don't have to look at that anymore. All right, I can see that it changed on my screen. I want to thank you guys for spending your time with me. And I hope that you guys were able to learn something that's going to help you guys be successful in your business, because I want you guys to be successful in digitizing and embroidering, just the same way I want myself to be successful in digitizing and embroidering. It's a lot of fun and I truly enjoy it, and I want as many people around for the ride as we can get. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go. If you guys do sew this out, use the hashtag Chroma Inspired when you do, and tag me in the post. Send me a private message if you don't want it to be seen by other people. If you have questions, feel free to drop them into this post. Make a new post in either this group or the Embroidery Nerd group, and we'll do our best to get them answered. And thank you guys for your time.